Hatch, we're very much about supporting people, freelancers, small businesses, organizations within the cultural and creative industries. We do have a wider range of businesses that we support. Typically, everyone that we work with is there to make a social impact. And so I'm really delighted actually to have such a diverse group of people here. The things that you're doing is phenomenal. And, you know, off the back of this call, please do feel free to get in touch with each other across the socials and find out more about each other. There's a wealth of power actually in this group. So this session, you know, how to manage your mental health during COVID-19, will be joined by Megan Moosa, and she is a psychologist. She's actually come all the way from Perth via the internet. How that works, I don't know, but she's currently in each of all of our homes by the power of intermagic, and so she's joining us, and we'll be able to I'll be asking her some questions, and you'll also have an opportunity to share some thoughts and ask some questions too. Okay, and I love doing this, a little bit of housekeeping, because you know, we've got our own set of rules. We just want you to relax. Make sure you have a drink. You know, keep your microphone on mute, please. If you do have a question, type it in. You can send it to the Hatch Ideas. If you don't, you can send it to everyone. You can send it to Hatch Ideas, or you can raise your hand, and then Shao will open up your microphone. It would keep it fluid, but it just helps us to be able to hear everybody, and because digital is a bit weird in terms of like trying to manage Q&A. So that's it really. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you all to Megan. And so just to give everybody a bit of an understanding, if you could just let us know a little bit about yourself, please, Megan, you know, and the work that you do.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Thank you for welcoming me into your homes, everyone, by the way, and lovely to meet you. I am a psychologist here in Perth, Western Australia, and I've been practicing now for I think about 10 or 11 years. I work for a private company in Perth, really focusing on teenagers, adults. I do some couples work as well as some trauma-based clients as well. I've also had some experience working in vocational rehabilitation, so really focusing on occupational health, safety, looking at rehabilitating psychological injuries, as well as those physical health issues which come through things like insurance-based claims and workers' compensation, and basically stress, anxiety, depression, which comes through work and our personal lives, has kind of been what I've been focusing on during that time.
During the kind of like COVID, as you know, it's something that's affecting us all over the world. So we can talk quite broadly about it. But, you know, what are some of the things that you've been noticing about how people have been dealing with the situation, specifically from, you know, your point of view as a psychologist, you know, your client base?
Yeah, it's been really interesting, you know, because really for all of us, regardless of our backgrounds or our age, COVID-19 has been a huge unknown for us. So it was really, you know, trying to figure out, okay, so based on our clients and, you know, what their issues are, what this look like, which is once again another huge unknown. And a lot of our clients really have had to manage in Australia, just like, you know, over the UK and around the world, things like, you know, lockdown and social isolation, or people having issues with employment, and not really knowing how long this is going to last for, or, you know, what kind of impact this will have on their overall health, well-being, their relationships. For me, with my teenagers, a lot of it has been based around school and managing their social interactions, as that's, you know, quite a focus for them. With the adults or the couples, it's also about, you know, for a lot of my couples who have some kind of, presenting issue with marital stress or communication, this is the first time in a long time where they've had to spend so much time alone without really having much of an escape through work, or going over to visit friends, or going out and spending their time outdoors. So it's really been about managing that. How do we still allow ourselves the time to build on our relationship, but also acknowledge that we also need our space. So that's kind of been what I've noticed with my clients.
So I mean, can I just say, have you been noticing that there's a lot more sort of it's more like things are simpler because there's less noise, but so they're having to focus in on some on some of those areas that I guess have been put to one side. So managing the relationships that you have with your children, or with your partner, or with yourself, that you haven't potentially looked at for 20 years.
And some of my clients, like a lot of us, don't really want to acknowledge that, or don't really want to take that time to be mindful of what they've kind of been distracted themselves with for how many years, and that in itself can be an issue.
I picked up on the way you said distracted. Yes, there's so many things that we've been able to distract ourselves with, and they're not there anymore. And so so there's a kind of like nakedness, and that exposure, I mean personally, I'm feeling that exposure, that rawness, because all the kind of fats that I had built up with all the distractions seems to have gone, and sort of like standing there a little bit naked.
Almost like we're forced to look at ourselves in that raw kind of fashion, or really take this time to look at where we are during this time, whereas our usual day-to-day for most of us could come across as being quite overwhelming, but we deal with it day in, day out. That just becomes life.
That's so interesting, actually, the grind, especially because on this call we have got some of the most exceptional pioneers that I've certainly met, who do Herculean things every day. So it's quite interesting how, again, I'll speak for myself, how one can kind of like deal with quite a lot of things, but then when you have to deal with absence, or I wouldn't say absence yet, but just deal with simplicity, that in itself seems, and I think, and why is that? Why is that so? I guess, there's so many things, so many words are actually flying around in my head. But why is it such a challenge dealing with sitting at home?
For some of us, I mean, if sitting at home is part of what is familiar to us, what feels familiar for us, then that is a positive. For a lot of us, being out of the house and being active and being, away from home for 12 to 14, sometimes 16 hours a day, depending on, what you're doing and what your focus is, that becomes your normal. So being at home, not really having that time almost to have that escape, or to invest in what you would acknowledge as being your normal, that's essentially been taken away from you.
So it's actually now acknowledging that this is not normal, because I think it's interesting. I've been getting a lot of the messages, especially from TV and radio, and a lot of people on social media, saying things like, all you have to do is stay at home, it's not so bad. I'm like, it must be bad because I'm crying every day.
And this is it. And when I say normal, it becomes our normal. So what my normal could look like could be very different to yours, or Anne's, or Maria's, or Sarah's, for that matter. So it's really about acknowledging what our normal is and what we're going to be changing that to during this time, because we also don't know how long this is going to last for, you know, or when we're going to return to our new normals, because remembering that even when things improve, which it will, in time things will improve, and we return to our usual everyday tasks and activities, our usual lifestyles, it's still not going to be exactly how it may have looked
So
before.
how do we acknowledge?
Sorry.
Yeah. So how do we practice? I mean, I'm all about practical. Sorry, but how do we acknowledge our normal? You know?
Yeah, I think part of that is about looking at, well, looking at what is that causing any stress or anxiety regarding where we are now. Okay, because now is what we're being faced with. This is, you know, our present day. We can acknowledge where we were, but looking at where we are now, we almost have to create this new acceptance for this time and this space, whether we like it or not, because we can't really change that. We're all pretty much in this waiting game. And for a lot of us, our lives can be very structured. You know, we know what when we're doing, you know, activities, we know what goals we have for this, you know, fortnight, this month. We're looking at 3-month plans, 6-month plans. But it's more about being mindful of, okay, hang on. Ideally, in my usual normal space, I would be able to focus on those, you know, fortnightly, monthly, 3-monthly, or 6 half-yearly plans. But right now, I don't really have the capacity to look at what it's going to be like in 6 months' time, which in itself can become quite stressful.
You said something really
you know,
interesting.
because that's a significant unknown once again. And those are the unknowns which can then create not only the heightened feeling of stress, but also the anxiety, those anxious feelings as well. So
Actually,
bringing it back, sorry, continue.
No, go, let me let you finish, sorry.
Yeah, so I guess to answer your question, it's first of all, bringing yourself back to now. Okay, we can always, you know, look at future plans, you know, in time. However, right now, look at what should we create, what goals should we create right now during this time, and how are we going to do that? What is that going to look like for the next 3 days, for the next week? Really narrowing it down, being mindful of what this is going to look like, because, you know, in Australia, for example, restrictions, you know, businesses, everything changes every 2 to 3 days. You know, for myself, I mean, with my employment, my hours have been restricted, and then how I manage my clients, how I create my appointments, how I create their treatment plans, that is not how I would usually do it. But I have to, we still have to have a plan. That's part of our motivation. That's part of our, you know, a path and creating that sense of direction for us. However, it needs to be managed, focused on our new normal, that being present of what's going on now at this point.
While you were talking, what was going through my head, because I am very much the kind of person that I have a 20-year plan.
Which is great.
Which involves a yacht. But but you know, for someone like me, the idea of taking things day by day, or even 3 days at a time, I absolutely understand and feel the power of that. But there's still so much anxiety that also brings up, you know, and it's kind of like, I don't know if you have anything to say to that, you know, you know, what steps, what strides do we manage to take to get towards this reclaiming our normal, you know?
I guess one thing that I should suggest in regards to that is not holding back on that, you know, your creative mind, not holding back on the motivation and the you know, that self encouragement that you have in creating those goals and forward planning. However, during this time, we have to be able to almost set two to-do lists. Okay, because like yourself, some of us are forward planners, we think way ahead. So it's really difficult for us to be focused on today and tomorrow. But what we don't realize is we actually are facing what's happening today through our everyday activities anyway. However, our thoughts are just, way ahead of us. By having two different to-do lists, if you want to call it that, you can still have this list which incorporates, what you need to do and what you need to achieve for that year, 10-year or 20-year plan, and how you're going to do that. But then also be able to distinguish between what you're going to add to the to-do list for now, because that's what we can be more proactive with. The downfall I see with my clients is when we only focus on the to-do list for the future, as we usually do. It can be quite demotivating. It can become not only stressful, but quite, sad and hurtful, because we're not achieving as we usually would, which then impacts our sense of self, which then impacts our confidence, and not only our confidence, but our identity in who we are and who we pride ourselves to be. So yes, we can still forward plan, but be mindful of both lists.
You actually maybe become quite aware of some of the things I've been going through, in the sense of setting myself maybe tasks that are not even achievable. My goodness, I've learned so much in 10 minutes already, in the sense of being mindful of the new reality, and setting tasks or goals. But I mean, is there kind of like a management process really, when we're approaching tasks and goals, so that we don't push ourselves into woeful despair?
Yeah.
Because all
which is the truth, right? This is a part of what happens. It's a natural process. Part of that, in response to that, I'd probably encourage you to look at, okay, so firstly, if you're going to look at those two lists, my current to-do list, what I'm doing now and what that looks like, as well as contributing to my future to-do list. If you're looking at what needs to be done now, our current to-do list, focus on breaking that down. Breaking it down as to what needs to happen now, what am I able to achieve now? Because during this time, things like, communication barriers can also impact our ability to achieve our goals. Something as a simple phone call to, a business partner or to a company who would usually be of support in creating our idea could actually be once again a barrier to us, because they may not be available. Businesses have closed. So right there, what we usually seem as an easy task of picking up the phone and creating an appointment time and, meeting with colleagues or business partners, we're unable to achieve that. So really breaking our goals down into 5 steps. So for today, what am I hoping to achieve? How am I going to work towards my current to-do list in 5, if not 5, break it down to 3, because really when you think about it, those 3 points on your to-do list can be broken down even further, especially in the time that we are living in now.
So just make, sorry.
The other, sorry?
Yeah,
no, continue.
Just make things really even more manageable than
ever.
So, it's always good to give sort of like examples, but I can imagine a number of us are having to negotiate with suppliers or clients. And an interesting thing that I've realized that I need to do is, even before having a call with a client, I prepare, whereas before I didn't need to prepare as much, because I could just move into the call, but I actually pull back a bit and actually write down what it is that I'm trying to say and what I want to achieve, and it just takes me away from the anxiety of, you know, a task that would have been so simple 2 months ago that has now become quite challenging, not for my own personal, but because they might not be available, you know, all different things are going on. So is that the kind of thing you mean in terms of breaking tasks?
100%. Because right there, what you just mentioned is, for example, one point on your to-do list. However, that one point you just broke down into planning, you know, a 3-point planning stage of what I need to be discussing in or during that conversation. So right there, your 1 point or your one goal for the day was actually 3. And it just looks very different because, you know, doing what you do, this is a part of your day-to-day anyway. You are very organized, you know, you're very mindful of what needs to be done and when and what it's going to look like and how we get there. But it just means bringing it back to now and creating these few steps and breaking those down, and that becomes our focal
Megan,
point.
thank you so much. I was really flowing into that beautifully. I want to bring everybody into this conversation now because I'm keen to hear other voices in the discussion. Does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask at this point? If you put your hand up. Oh, Maria, Sha, if you can, thank you. Oh, Maria, are you able to do your microphone yourself? Oh, there we go, perfect.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to talk about guilt, actually. It feels like the world has gone topsy-turvy. So in my world, I used to be the person doing lots of volunteering, lots of unpaid work. You know, the cultural sector, there's so much to be done. And it's like now, and then there were lots of other people, the general public, who didn't really do volunteering. They weren't really doing very much at all. It was a few people doing a lot. And now you've got everybody stitching scrubs and making masks, and you know, the general public have kind of really stuck up with their volunteering. And I feel like a lot of the requests that are coming to me are for even more of my time as a volunteer rather than as a paid professional, and I kind of struggle with that a little bit, actually.
And that's, you know, quite a natural response to have during these times. You know, it's quite unpredicted. Something that I'd probably recommend is, I think I've mentioned it before in our chats, is it's important at this point to recognize what you want your journey to look like for this point in time. As you said, you know, before COVID-19, your role looked very different to what it is now. And, you know, the situation has changed. Your role is changing.
Yeah, I don't really have much of a role.
You know? Yeah. So it needs to, I'd probably encourage you to take some time to think about, you know, during this time, and once again, it's not going to be forever. We're looking at, what do I want my journey to look like right now? And how much control do I have over that? Because without recognizing what our journey is going to look like and coming to a point of acceptance of where you are in that journey, we're going to keep, you know, reverting back to what was. And that's where the guilt comes in, pretty much, because we can't go back there. This is what's changed. This is the new normal, essentially. And we can't control everyone else. We have to come back to ourselves.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Megan.
If that answers your question.
Thank you. I've got another question from Victoria, and this is about, so Victoria is very well used to working from home, but she wanted to know, how does one handle other people who are not used to working from home? You know, how do we, let me just read it out. How do you handle people you work with who don't know how to handle this, who are bringing their own anxiety to your normal? And how do you respect your time and space and protect yourself from the instability that they bring to your own working day?
That's a really good question. I can even, for me, working from home is not my normal. My hours are, quite restricted because I do have 2 kids and I have to do the school pickups, and, life is very different to what it is now, where most of 95% of my client load is based on Zoom, pretty much, or telehealth conferencing through telephone calls and using platforms such as, Skype or FaceTime or Meet. We almost have to be able to acknowledge where your colleague or where the other person is at, focusing on their positives. So what are their strengths in working from home? What are they able to do? What is realistic for them? And what are the issues that they're actually facing? What do they find problematic about working from home? Because when we're familiar with it and we know how to, include working from home in our lives, it's familiar. It's part of what we do. But when it's not, we pretty much have to have an introduction to realizing how we're going to manage this. How are we going to find, once again, our new normal being at home? And that can come with, a variety of problems. It's not easy, So I guess I'd focus on, 1, what the strengths are, and 2, what the problems are. Why does it become problematic for that person to work from home? Because if we're only going to focus on the problems, we're not actually able to utilize that person's strengths in what could be used by or utilized by using this platform.
Victoria, I hope that answered your question. That actually what you just the subject is actually quite interesting, because I was very reluctant to turn my space into a home office, only because I didn't want the lockdown to extend to a time that would require me to have to overhaul my environment. And I noticed that there were some people who immediately decorated a room and turned it into a space. Some people immediately built shelves, and I'm now thinking, actually, I'll make my space more comfortable, even if I enjoy it for a day. But I think that, are there any sort of again, always fishing for the practical, are there any kind of like practical things that we can be doing to move from one, I guess, environment to another?
I'm a huge advocate for structure where possible, and during a time of uncertainty, unfamiliarity, it's very easy to lose that sense of structure that would usually become quite familiar to us. So things like creating a new day, even pre-COVID, what would our day look like? Okay, so, dropping the kids off, grabbing a coffee, heading into the office, meeting a few clients, making a few calls. Okay, so let's bring that back to our new office for our new normal. Okay, we have almost this luxury, if you want to call it that, of creating our new day. What do we want that day to look like? Based on our goals, we set those goals or those tasks on our current to-do list for that day. Okay, so what times are we looking at? Break that down. When am I going to make those calls? When am I focusing on, my creative side? When am I focusing on, my physical activity, whether that's, doing, going out, in regards to restrictions, going out for that walk, or, taking time at home to do, some mindfulness activities, or yoga or meditation. Creating your day, creating that structure enhances an idea and almost allows ourselves to accept that we have a new normal.
And I think also have the resilience to face all the unknown things that are coming to us.
Yeah.
You know, because as you were talking, I think, again, I'll speak for myself, you know, the underlying fear is like, where's, you know, there's more going out than coming in.
Yeah.
And, you know, and having the sort of like emotional capacity and mental space to be able to face these challenges is really what I'm seeking.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So I mean, if you could speak a little, I mean, everything you've said speaks to that, but if there was anything more that you'd want to add in terms of like, how do you it's a big question, how does one deal with reality?
Wow, we could all be here for a few, you know, for a while.
We've
Quite
got 9
philosophical.
minutes to cover it.
You know, as much as we want to resist it, I would really encourage trying to be mindful of both body and mind. You know, we often run physically, we often run on emotions, but right now we could always see this, or almost this imbalance occurring, because once again, should our anxiety or, you know, our stress levels be heightened, we're running on that unknown. You know, we're trying to find answers that we don't actually have the answers to. Looking at body and mind, we're almost trying to take this holistic perspective of focusing on things like, you know, our current overall health and well-being, you know, our sleeping, our eating, our, you know, physical activity, like I mentioned before, our connections, you know, what kind of interactions we're having with not only friends and family, but also our, you know, business partners or colleagues. Without being mindful of that, I think we can almost lose that sense of being present, and that then creates this imbalance, which often would lead to stress and anxiety. Because remember, stress, anxiety, and, you know, a low mood or depression can be part of our everyday. That's just life. We're human. We're allowed to feel. We're allowed to be angry and upset and frustrated. That's okay. But being able to be put, you know, to have this kind of holistic perspective kind of opens up a few doors for us, especially in regards to the new normal that we're trying to create as well.
Thank you so much. Does anyone else have any questions? We've still got some time.
I've unmuted everybody, so if anyone has a question
or want to add something.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. I think it's something that came up last week for me in another meeting, which is it's again about sort of guilt stroke burnout. Really, it's that actually, you know, I'm not living the lockdown dream in terms of I haven't learned a new language. I haven't taken up to some cooking, you know, I'm not sewing because actually I'm so busy in my job still, because we support other organisations similar to Hatch, and you know, I'm constantly working, and I don't think I have those sort of boundaries anymore because, you know, my days just tend to bleed, and yeah, I just sort of wanted to ask a question about, I suppose, managing the guilt of just working and being so tired that I can't do anything else, but also to avoid burnout in terms of, you know, what is just seems to be a constant working pattern.
I like how you mentioned the lockdown dream. You know, I think we all kind of had this preconceived idea of what, because of the unknown, of what this should look like or what it would mean should we go into lockdown, or, you know, should we not have access to our usual, you know, our spaces. So therefore your working space becomes your living space, which is your, you know, a day, and what we're going on weeks now, months. So I think that then creates this almost confusion for ourselves internally when recognizing, okay, we don't really have two distinct areas. We are living in a space and we're working in a space. So one way of looking at, okay, so how do we manage that? Being mindful of one, what we're hoping to do or achieve in that time, and creating time for yourself as well. You know, yes, it might not, look anywhere near the lockdown dream you were, previously thinking about. But if we don't allow ourselves to distinguish between the personal and the professional, essentially you're on that wheel that just continues to turn without even stopping and realizing it until we reach burnout stage. Because at one point we're thinking, okay, well, we know we've got to keep going, because if we stop right now, there could be other consequences to that. And the plus side is that we have this time, so we might as well utilize it while it's here. But at the same time, we're not really being mindful of what that would mean long term. And by long term, I'm not even talking about next year or 10 years time. What would the sense of burnout look like for you in 3 weeks time, or in 2 weeks time? So yeah, I'd probably say try to allow yourself some space. Having your task will give you that sense of achievement, so you are working, you are doing what you need to do for that time, which kind of creates that motivation rather than creates that sense of guilt that you must keep going. And without having that space to actually be mindful of you right now, and like I said earlier, what you want this journey to look like, unfortunately, you're right, it could end up in burnout mode.
Thank you. Sarah, did that cover?
Yeah,
thank you, Megan.
Good to share as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. No, I'm so happy actually that you're sharing. Sorry, Maria.
Just
yes,
wanted
Maria.
to ask Sarah, do you feel like what you're doing is productive, or do you feel like you're trying to stop the tide coming in?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think being a bit of a control freak, I'm probably trying to just control things that are out of my control. So I'm just constantly busy. And I do sometimes wonder, I'm just busy doing nothing almost, So,
Yeah.
but I'm doing 12 hours a day, and probably the weekends. So, I think that idea of sort of manageable to-do list today, and also to be just a little bit more disciplined. One example today, I was really proud of myself. Someone said to me, can I talk about something this Friday? And I said, well, actually it's bank holiday this Friday, and I'd just like to take it off.
Good.
Because I would normally, because I work full time, I normally take back holiday.
Yeah.
And I was really proud of myself, because I could have said yes, because I'm not doing anything, obviously. But I was really proud that I was a bit more disciplined about that sort of work-home balance again, which has just gone into chaos and free fall.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well done.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think the reason that we're doing these sessions is typically we're working with a lot of people who have to manage teams and organizations, and some of the things that that brings, we're really keen to kind of like support that conversation. I'm really happy that you actually touched on that, because there's a lot of guilt that comes with not supporting the world, especially when we're working in these huge kind of like social impact, government kind of like projects. But I wanted to take off of what you were saying and actually talk about hitting the wall. And I've hit the wall 3 times during this lockdown, where I've like want to just pack my bags and just run away. So,
there you go.
I know, right? But you don't know me. I'll totally be able to get a chartered. Literally, I would. I'm off to Bahamas, but in terms of speaking to sort of like burnout and hitting the wall kind of thing, I've been talking to a few people, and it's quite. They've been using quite violent language actually, and it's quite. It's heartwarming that people are sharing, but how do we how do we deal with some of the new thoughts that are coming to us that we've never ever had before, and are probably frightening us more than, how do we deal with the new anxieties and the new language and the new emotional highs and lows? And I know that everything that you've said is about how to prevent them, but it's kind of like, when we're there,
Yeah.
how do we, basically what happens when you hit the wall,
Yeah.
Where do
And
you go from there?
that's been quite common, even with my clients, where I've seen some of my clients, for my long-term clients, for 2 or 3 years, and in my opinion they were traveling quite well, to the point where I'd only see them once a month or once every 6 weeks, which is pretty good. I've seen them on a few occasions during this period where they've, I wouldn't say regressed, but they're just more aware of these thoughts, and at most times negative thoughts, thoughts that I haven't really focused on before or noted, because they're not really as distracted or not as busy as they were before. What I've suggested is, if we really want to know why this is coming through for us now, is simply make a note of it. Firstly, acknowledge the thought, acknowledge whatever it is, because distraction is essentially, it's a way of tricking the brain, but at the same time, it's a handy tool for us to keep functioning. And sometimes the negative thoughts come through, they prevent us from functioning as we usually would. So I'd say make a note of it. Every time there's negative thoughts, whatever, as simple or as complex it may seem, make a note of it. What you'll probably find, whether it's on your phone, because you have a phone handy, over a piece of paper, make a note of those and you'll find themes coming through. Whether it's 3 thoughts, the same thoughts over a week, or whether it's random thoughts that you've never thought about, recognize the themes. Because if we can recognize the themes and be aware of it, we can actually take the time to actually work through it, because it's those thoughts that are impacting how we feel, which then impact our behavior or how we respond. Okay, so for example, Sarah was saying, earlier on that, she's naturally quite a busy person. So she's, whether she's actually doing something on task or some random task just to, pass the time, she's just trying to keep busy. So if she has, whatever thought coming through being a negative thought, okay, let's make note of that. Why is this particular thought coming through for us at this time? What can we do about that thought? We have 2 options. Ask yourself the questions: can I control this thought right now? Can I do anything about it? Yes or no? You only have 2 options right now. We're at a time where we don't have a maybe or a but or a what if or, how about, we don't have that. Right now, we only have 2 options. Can I control or change this right now? Yes or no? If we can, act on it. If it means contacting someone, if it means, you're missing that social interaction, or, you want to have that connection from friends or family, make that call now. Try to arrange a time via, whether it's text, phone, Zoom, however you want to, create that connection. Do it. If that answer is no, and we're unable to control this thought that's coming through right now, or we can't change this thought right now, well, then you know what? We have to acknowledge it, that it's there, make a note of it, but we have to park it. We haven't suppressed the thought. We haven't dismissed it. We haven't just, swept it under the rug. We've recognized the thoughts there. We've accepted this same thought just keeps popping up, What am I going to do about it?
Thank you. So give space to
give yourself,
Thank you. Well, I've just noticed the time, and gosh, that was powerful. Thank you so much, Megan. If there's any last things you'd like to say to the group before we sign off from today's session?
I'd really, encourage us all to be mindful of our current journey. It's so important. Yes, we are all in this together, you know, as we know, but our journeys look so different. So what, you know, comparing ourselves to pre-COVID or comparing ourselves to, you know, a colleague or a co-worker, what they're doing or what they're achieving right now, may look very different to what we need to do for ourselves. So I'd really encourage to focus on you, be mindful of what you need to do presently and what you'd like your journey to look like now during this COVID
That's
time.
perfect. Thank you so much, Megan. Really sincerely appreciate
No problem.
that. And I feel like I have to clap. Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for joining us for this session. We're trying to host these as often as we can. They tend to be 9:30 UK time in the morning. We keep an eye across our socials. Please, you know, we will do email us about topics we should cover. We're looking at covering copyright now. We've got digital going on, so we're looking at copyright for the next session, and we will be hosting another fundraising. But please do let us know, and follow us across all the socials just to keep an eye on what we're doing. And yes, so enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you. Thank you so much, Megan, and thank you so much to all of you. Okay, I feel like I need
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.